I believe that I am ready to make a video about the video log for building the Ford Transit Connect van. I have started modeling what I predict will be the enclosure configuration. So in previous videos, I sort of discussed different enclosure designs, different subwoofer configurations, and I'm dead set on using the Dayton Audio Ultimax 18-inch sub. 4 of them. It fits the space really well. I'm a really big fan of that driver. They're on the affordability range, and the available space I can fit 4 in a nice wall with a port area I need is available. So here is, just for the sake of me video logging this process, I've drawn a whole bunch of different things. I use SketchUp. I don't have a subscription. This is their online free version, and it's powerful enough for me to do what I'd like to do. Based on the width constraints that I'm being held to, 42 inches wide, I do not have enough space to run the port vertically. But because I have 48 inches of height potential, I do have the ability to run this port horizontally. And so here's the layout configuration. Basically, I'm going to be able to cut a 19-inch wide panel for the top and bottom sections of this enclosure, and then just cut out the baffle holes for the drivers. I'm going to put a divider wall. This is essentially all just for the purposes of bracing, but this panel can also be 19 inches, which is easy to set up on a table saw and just run a bunch of sheets through and cut up. So this will be a 19-inch high panel, this will be a 19-inch high panel, and then the panels that the drivers mount on will be 19 inches. This is the way that I like to build enclosures and brace them. So I'll be able to start from the bottom, and I'll probably run full-length sheets on either side, but in the middle, we'll be able to glue, screw, attach this bottom panel and this panel, and I might attach some small pieces in here on either side, and then we can put like the bottom panel for the port, and all that. The port panel will rest on all that and be easily attached and affixed, and it'll be easy to make square. And that'll be like one layer of this enclosure. And then the internal port is about 7 inches high, and so I can just cut 2 panels, attach them, and it'll be easy to get screws in from the top and bottom, and then I can attach the top panel of the port. So really, this is just trying to brace everything so that there's rigidity. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not in the school. I've discussed this already, but I'm going to reiterate it. I'm not in the school of double and triple wall, glue a bunch of 3/4 inch together to make your enclosure rigid. That's not, is my technical experience and opinion that it's a waste of material. It's a lot of added weight, and you can get rigidity in other ways. If you look at any form of construction, vacuum chambers, pressure vessels, it's not, you use thickness to gain structural strength, but if you use a honeycomb pattern or a grid system, you can have high levels of rigidity and less weight. So this is what I believe to be the best. I haven't drawn every aspect of this enclosure. Once once all this is cut up and laid out, I'm going to have some cross paneling like these H shapes. That'll be in all of this enclosure. So this represents bracing that I'll have everywhere in here. I'm just not going to draw it. I believe that gets us something like, let's see here. Bracing basically every 10 inches. I think that there's somewhere between 10 and 12 inches. 12 inches. So every 12 inches, we've got bracing, which means that there's only 12 inches of 3/4 inch plywood between a brace that's located somewhere within this enclosure. I mean, you could argue that there are places that, I could brace more. I just don't think it's going to be necessary. I've already built an enclosure with one of these Ultimax 18s, and I braced at about this interval. And the enclosure is rigid. I don't have any issues. There's no acoustical signature from the enclosure, so I think that this will be sufficient. But I wanted to give you guys an idea of sort of my thought process here. I've drawn a couple of different layouts, and it just becomes a matter of what is easy to build and easy to do. So one of my earlier designs was this paneling here would be solid all the way from top to bottom, and that kind of works, but the larger the panels are, the harder they are to work with. Like, there's a small part of me that thinks maybe I'd be wiser to, instead of taking full panels for the sides and breaking it up into layers and being able to build vertically, it gets kind of challenging. If you have a panel that's directly on top of another, like if I was to extend and put a port, if I was to put a brace in this port directly in line with these two, but be separated by the horizontal panel, it's difficult to screw into. And so by staggering paneling like this, it's just for ease of getting screws, and all the screws are is to hold everything in place while glue dries. I don't believe that screws necessarily hold structural integrity over time. The glue is really what's going to be the strength. I just need the ability to set everything in place and screw it down while the glue's drying or while I'm mocking everything up. Is this weaker by not having a panel directly in line here? Sure, I think probably. Do I think that it's going to hinder the performance of this enclosure? No, I don't. This panel here locks the top to the top horizontal port panel, and these lock the two port panels together, and then this in conjunction with this cross bracing, I think the whole thing should be quite rigid. I like bracing like this because it's easy to rip a bunch of 3-inch wide pieces of 3/4 inch plywood on with a table saw, and then cut them to exacting lengths, and it's pretty easy to work with, and it doesn't take up a ton of internal enclosure volume, so you don't have to compensate by having a huge enclosure. This is just my opinion. Whether we have some paneling like this up in this top section, as far as making the enclosure volume the same for all of them, it does make sense to do so, just so that every section of this enclosure is symmetrical. Is it necessary for construction purposes? No, just for symmetry and enclosure volume, like similarities. Like, for all intents and purposes, this is an isolated chamber, and it doesn't interact with any of the other portions of this enclosure until it's part of the port. And so if I've got a bunch of bracing on the bottom section for ease of construction, but not on the top, it does technically change the enclosure volume and therefore the tune frequency. And I know it's going to be minimal, but just for the sake of symmetry's sake, I think it would be valuable. If I'm going to add paneling down here, then I need to add it up there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not that much harder. It actually makes it easier for the gluing process to have paneling like this. It's more glue surface. It's a little bit extra weight, but I'm not that concerned with it. Trying to think of what else goes into this design. The fiberglass wall that's currently in that vehicle, I'm not going to delete it entirely, but I will probably cut out a section of it so that this enclosure can butt right up against the existing fiberglassing, and it sort of, couples together. I'm thinking that there's a lip on that I'll be able to butt and even maybe screw the two fiberglass sheet and this wood together. Exactly how that is going to manifest, I'm not sure, but I do intend, that's why I've got this recess here, is so that enclosure, so that the fiberglass wall can actually come up in here and I can screw them together. How that'll happen right here, I haven't exactly like, three-dimensionally visualized that and how that would come together. Maybe you'll just notch this out, or maybe you'll just notch a little section of the fiberglass wall out. My intentions would be to screw this entire thing together with no glue and get everything to fit right, everything to look good, everything to make sense. Once it's screwed together, you can sort of pressure test it. You can actually like tap test, and you can identify, panels that are, resonant in undesirable ways, and decide if additional layers of bracing is necessary. I've got a panel here, just a little piece here that would make it easier for the gluing and attaching process. Does it add a ton of structural integrity? I mean, some, but I think it's more for ease of, if I can cut that the right dimension and screw these two panels together, then this is easy to just butt right up against, screw it in, and away we go. This is just a result of the enclosure is going to be a hair narrower than the actual available space I have. I could build an enclosure that takes up every bit of that space and just configure these edges so that it assimilates to that fiberglass wall. I could do that. I just don't seem to need to, because I still have all the space that I need, and I have something like 14 3/4 inches from the back doors, and I'd like to think that 14 inches is plenty for a battery bank. Likely the amplifiers will get mounted to the back of this enclosure. It'll be simple and clean. Like, I don't necessarily intend to open this up so that everybody can view it. Maybe it's just, I'd really much rather have people focused on wanting a demo, wanting to sit in the vehicle, and I don't know. I'm just not that motivated to design this whole thing to make it a display feature. I mean, I guess I'm not against it. It just depends. It's just not what I'm wanting to focus on right now. So yeah, here's a I don't know, I guess a little dive into my thought process for this enclosure design. I'd like to think that it's relatively doable. It's repeatable. All the panels that need to be the 19 inches, I can just set the saw, cut a bunch of panels up. Once I get to some of these other pieces, there's a simplicity here that's desirable. Yeah, that's kind of my thought process. I'd like to think that I'll be able to build this outside of the vehicle, and with help of strong people, get it lifted up into the vehicle, and it just to be able to slide right up in place, and then hopefully, with some integrity and simplicity, be able to attach and seal to the existing fiberglass wall that's in this vehicle. Maybe we'll end up having this big panel and then and the whole enclosure be separate from this bottom, and then the enclosure will slide in on top of a wood deck. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessary. I don't necessarily need the enclosure to extend like this. I I just thought maybe it'd be easy to have it all be one piece, and then whatever framing is built for an amplifier rack slash battery bank, battery rack, it would just be easy to do. So for now, that's the way it looks. Yeah, I don't think this video needs to be too long, but that's a dive into my thought process. At the moment, I'm not going to double baffle the front. Those speakers, let's see, how much do they weigh? Dayton Audio, Ultimax 18. Where is, do they have a weight? It's just under 50 pounds. 50 pounds, meh. I personally don't believe that I need to double wall this front. You could. I just don't think it needs it. There's a lot of support from the joints, and there's not a lot of material for it to flex, and so I just don't think it'll be necessary. And if it was a 100-pound sub, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Or if it was, 2,000-3,000 watt, and we were gonna push all that electrical energy in much smaller, much higher pressure being developed in the enclosure, yeah, maybe that would be useful. I just don't think it's necessary. And if any of you are still watching and are hating on the fact that I'm not doing that, it's like, I do hope to get this built and then get a chance to have anyone and everyone come demo it, and like to prove that, double walling is just not necessary if all other things are done properly. I considered doing a flush mount, so adding another panel so that it flush mounts the drivers. The problem that I actually have with that relative to this driver is this, the rubber surround on this is so tall. I mean, it's darn near 2 inches tall, and it's actually a little bit overkill. With only 28 millimeters of extrusion, we are not even getting close to maxing out the shape of that surround. It's not deforming, which is a good thing, but flush mounting, I don't know, it's not really that attractive when you've got this massive surround sticking out. It would be more attractive to flush mount, but I'm trying to do this on the budget, trying to do it on the cheap and on the simple, and I just don't see the need. It's not even necessary to have the port kind of protrude forward. I just think that it's got some structural, it's not even stronger as a result of that. I don't know. I just think it has a bit of an appeal to have the baffle recessed a small amount. I think that it'll make it, if I do this, then if I have this panel recessed, then when I go to actually do a finalized test fit to marry to the fiberglass wall that's in the vehicle, I can modify this outside ring and some of that to accommodate imperfections in the shapes. And ultimately you could cut all this off, and then it would just be a very flat panel. I mean, I guess it gets difficult, but before I glue it all together, I can take it apart and change any aspect of it. So yeah. The next step of this video log is for me to go outside and actually start cutting wood. I don't know how important it is to video log that. Any of you that are builders are going to know every trick that I already know. This might be useful for people that are just wanting to get into building, or just want to see how I do things, if maybe I have a unique way or a way that's different. So until the next video, but my plan now is to go out and start cutting up some wood, and I have a rough layout of how I think this should go, and it looks like it all adds up. So yeah, away we go.